Hello, everyone. My name is Oloyede Abimifuluwa, and I am the co-host for the Develop Africa podcast. And for me, it's about development in Africa. This is because of a few years of experience I've had working in Africa, and I'll be co-hosting this podcast with Bruno. Over to you, Bruno.
My name is Chikika Bruno. So I'm the co-host of the Develop Africa podcast, and the motivation for me is because I've sort of like played around in the international development space, and there's sort of like this information knowledge asymmetry where it feels like the information sort of like circulate amongst some sets of people and not a lot. So one of that could be interest. It could be a whole lot of factors, but I was looking to contribute to sort of like getting the information out there, getting people to know more about the development space, getting more eyes in, and getting more people to actually engage. And because we sort of like move Africa forward by engaging.
For you, what's the mission, the entire goal, the entire context behind this podcast for you? Can you share a little bit more light?
Oh yeah. So like I think one of the backstories is like when I was in the days, like we've had a couple of dinners together and we've talked about like we basically when we start talking about the developmental space, from what's happening, from the geopolitics of it all to development in itself in terms of infrastructure development and all that great stuff. So we see there's a lot of topics to talk about, a lot of areas to explore, and it's interesting, it's fascinating, but like I said initially, there's sort of like that information gap. Like people that are not in the development space don't even know a lot is happening. Like I know a lot of people that don't know what the AU is about, or organizations like GIZ that operate in the development space, or what they are doing. And those guys, they do a lot of youth empowerment, women education, childcare, and all that. So I think the mission for me is sort of like to elevate some of those conversations, at those organizational level, and even in country development, to see what are we doing as countries in Africa to advance infrastructure needs, education, because some of these ideas can cross-pollinate. So things that people are doing in S country that are successful, you can replicate it in Y country, maybe tweak some cultural context or informational context or whatever, you can get similar results.
For me, you mentioned about people don't even understand what the AU and some other international governmental organization do. It's so amazing that in most secondary schools or in most primary schools in Africa, they probably teach you about your regional economic communities or the African Union, but it's sort of vague. Mm-hmm. People don't understand at all. Organizations like the UN, people know that, these people are diplomats, but they don't have a clear understanding about what exactly these people are doing. So I like the fact that you mentioned that. And for me, I think we share the same sentiment. A lot of people think that this space is gatekept, it's overreaching, but it's actually reachable because I was just a very normal person working before I came into this space. I like talking about these things. I've been so embedded in this space that I love talking about it. I find it interesting. I know how important it is to talk about development. I want people to also be aware about it. So I think that's one of my major motivation for hosting this podcast. But what are the episodes you look forward to the most talking about on this podcast?
So for me, based on my sort of like my experience and stuff, I'm mostly a tech, innovation, infrastructure, development in terms of like physical infrastructure and that kind of thing. So basically looking to explore that. So me, for the most part, I've been about AI. So and now it's becoming front center of our conversation, and the advance in the models that are going on by the leading research labs like OpenAI, Meta, Google. And if we see sort of like the slow pace of development in Africa and how we usually play catch up, and I feel like AI is going to be a fundamentally different technology from every other technology that has come and gone before it, and we're able to sort of like, play catch up slowly, and the consequences are also there. I personally feel AI is different, so I want to do whatever I can to elevate that conversation. Then downstream of that, We have energy challenges in Africa. So I have some energy background. So have those conversations, see who is building the new energy plant, nuclear energy, solar energy, then road infrastructure, railway. So mostly those kind of things, and also business and who is doing what in the IT development space. That's what I'm looking forward to talking about. So what about you? What are your key? Let me guess, climate change.
Definitely climate change. I've gone into this deep rabbit hole of climate change. In fact, I got so deep that I had to start studying. I just took up another course on green economy just because of my new inquisitiveness in this space. So I really look forward to talking about climate change, the intersection of climate change. I know you've mentioned something like nuclear power, solar, photovoltaics, and the likes. Those are like cross-cutting because it's climate change, it's technology, it's energy also. And then for me, I want to talk about the policy side. I want to talk about the geopolitics of this narrative of climate change. It's so exciting right now that two world powers like presidents talking down on climate change, not being climate conscious, even though their past regime has invested a lot in climate change, and then their ally is like big on climate change, ensuring that companies are paying carbon taxes, issuing policies like, for example, like the carbon border adjustment mechanisms to be able to ensure that they protect their organizations or companies, industries in their own region. So like this is so interesting for me. And then aside from that, I have like a whole communication background. So I want to talk about communications. I get this thing a lot where people just ask me like, what exactly is this communication thing? So it's quite vague. I want to talk more about these things and any other conversation that I find exciting.
Oh yeah, that makes so much sense. So and I think I think one thing I like you said is sort of like the intersectionalities of it all, because like and the climate change example and energy you gave is very interesting, because so you can have climate change, you want to generate cleaner energy. So what kind of energy solutions do you want to promote? Do you want to promote what is it called, nuclear energy? Then how is the storage? How sort of like do you do nuclear waste disposal? Then what is the regulatory impact on that? Then AI requires a lot of energy. So how do you reduce sort of like how do you increase your energy output, reducing your land footprint in terms of energy generation and stuff? So, and then there's a policy aspect where you sort of like have to draft governments, not us. Anyway, governments have to draft policies to basically, so unpacking all that is going to be an interesting conversation. And you know what? I was thinking about something recently when we were talking about this whole podcasting. And I was thinking to myself, like most of these conversations we're going to be having, we'll just basically be sharing our opinion. There will be lots of people that will disagree with us. Definitely. And sometimes these things are not clear-cut, or this person is in the right, this person is in the wrong, because there are nuances to it, like, so the climate change, for example, you have, so I saw this chart where you have like a historical chart where the US, China, most of these developed nations, they haven't really cared much about the climate change because they spent about 150 years developing, and they've done the industrialization and they've polluted the atmosphere with CO2. Then you're talking about climate change to Africans that haven't developed, and we don't have efficient energy sources to accelerate that development without contributing to the carbon footprint. So there's sort of like that balance in dynamics. It will be interesting to read the comments and engage with the community.
I was having a conversation with a colleague of mine. He's not pro climate change, especially the narrative behind carbon credits being a commodity. So he's not keen on that. He's like, we have rare metals that the world needs to actually transition right now. Why are we going to be investing in intangible assets that doesn't mean a thing? Leasing out wide expanse of land just to gain carbon credits, which is not a lot of money compared to our rare earth metals that we can explore, we can use to fast track our development, we can export, we can use to generate more energy to bridge the energy gap in Africa. So it was a lengthy discussion because I had a very different perspective about how these things should go, and then he had a very different perspective. And this conversation is actually what influences policy decisions, because you're able to gauge different opinions, you're able to gauge risks from different angles. Definitely on this podcast, I know we'll be talking with people, we'll be speaking with people, we want to hear from people, we want to hear from our audience. We don't want to talk at them. So it's something I look forward to hearing feedbacks. I look forward to listening to counter opinions on various topics that we speak about. And again, just at the end of the day, make Africa truly developed. And that's, I think, the end goal. So what's your call to action for our viewers?
Yeah, so for the call to actions, I'm just going to borrow something you said, that we'll be talking with them, not at them. So for us, like, we're two individuals with opinions, and our opinions might not necessarily agree with yours, like, which is good. So I believe in having conversations from multiple perspectives where we all share ideas, and the interchange of ideas, you sort of like have some sort of like sentences where you can get to a point where we can pick out, okay, this works, and for me, that is the biggest thing we can do as Africans, to begin to elevate these conversations to a level of consciousness and just improve our collective consciousness, even if that's the only thing we do. So my call of action is that, come, and we'll be bringing in experts, people that are more knowledgeable than us in specific areas that we talked about, to give deeper insight in these things. And we're also looking to engage the youth perspective, because most of the statistics say we're about 60 to 70% youth on the African continent. So that means an informed youth means a brighter Africa tomorrow. So when we engage in conversations like this, we'll basically increase the information available, reduce the information asymmetry, and ensure that we have sort of like good frameworks to make decisions for now and for the future. So what about you?
Okay. For me, I just really want people to tune in. Like, it's going to be a very interesting ride. It's also going to be an adventurous one. So I also want to hear perspective from different opinions, from different realities. I want you guys to speak with us. We want to hear from you. And at the end of the day, we are going to make Africa as developed as possible. It starts with the youth. I like one thing you said, that a more informed youth makes a better developed, or a more developed Africa. So we are going to do that together, and then we want you, audience, to stay connected.
So we have the Trump election just happened, and Trump is now the president of the U.S. Now he's taking a wrecking ball to a lot of things, and USAID, is on the chopping block. Then you have a downstream conversation that ensues from that. Like, Africans, how do we digest that? How do we navigate that? And I think the 4 years of Trump presidency is going to be interesting, and we're starting this podcast about that same time.
It's a lot of geopolitics going on, a lot of international politics at play with Trump presidency, and I know we'll be going more into details with that.
One last thing. So to the listeners, if you know somebody interesting you think we should talk to, you can send us a DM. If you have a topic that is interesting to you, you can send us a DM. We'll try to put it as part of the weekly, as part of the conversation catalog, and see when and how we can talk about them. So we want to engage with you, want to do what you like to hear, and just basically grow together.